Hi there and welcome to the Team 14 Rugby, the global rugby club, and we're bringing you rugby content based on passion, integrity and respect. And today is an absolutely massive day here at the Team 14. Gareth and I are hugely privileged to be sitting in the presence of greatness, former All Black, and a man heading into his 14th Six Nations, 4th World Cup as a head coach. He's coached Taupiri, Galwegians, Thames Valley, Connacht, Ireland, Wasps, Waikato, Wales, the Lions, 3 premierships, 1 European Challenge Cup, 1 Heineken Cup, 1 NPC, the Ranfurly Shield, 3 Six Nations, including 2 Grand Slams, 1 semi-final of a World Cup, a Lions Series victory in South Africa, and a Lions Series draw here in New Zealand. Welcome, Warren Gatland.
Thank you. It wasn't South Africa, it was Australia.
Oh, it was Australia. There we go.
That's madness. And right now about to head into your 14th Six Nations as a head coach. This year coming up 4th World Cup as a head coach. So, we're buzzing out to be able to talk to you, Warren. Thanks very much. But before all of this, you're a rugby player and one of massive value, an All Black in itself. And all your other achievements seem to dampen the fact that you were actually an All Black legit.
I was a number 8 until I was about 19, 20 and realised that I was going to be too slow, not tall enough and too fat to be a loose forward if I wanted to play at the highest level. But I was reasonably skillful. I played a lot of cricket growing up. So I loved being a loose forward. So the opportunity sort of to move into the front row and become a hooker was something that I relished and really thrived on. But having that experience being a loose forward as well and the school level gave me a sort of a greater understanding of the game. And I had a insatiable appetite for knowledge and wanting to know things. I was lucky enough to go a few All Black trials, and the first time there, I listened to players like Grant Fox and just come out of the All Blacks winning in '87 and part of a great Auckland team, and everything that he said, I just hung on every word and just trying to pick up as much information as I could. And that's kind of been the way that I've always operated on. Look, I don't know everything about the game. I'm still learning today, and still I love sitting down and talking to people about rugby and some people will say something that'll just trigger something, it'll remind me about something. So really fortunate in my playing days that I played for some pretty good sides and met some good people on the way, which was pretty important.
That team, the Waikato team, that I used to watch videos of as a kid, Steve, you see them playing live.
Yeah.
There's a few guys on that team that John Mitchell has had a massive impact on the game. South Africa, now England again, USA for a while, Ian Foster currently with the All Blacks, and Brent Anderson in your second row. He had still has a direct impact on New Zealand Rugby Union at a level just below professional level. And then there's you, Ireland, Wales, England.
Yeah, you've got someone like Andrew Strawbridge as well. He's been involved with the Chiefs and now coaching Waikato and been involved with New Zealand. So a lot of players, a lot of people had a big impact on sport. Matthew Cooper involved with Sport Waikato and for a number of years. And other players sort of had been overseas and coached as well. So I think it was a kind of a team. I learned a lot from that team in terms of we're a young side coming together and we just got better year after year after year. But we still had a few coaches that changed during that time. I remember Coach Glenn Ross came in. He had a massive impact on us because Glenn was incredibly well organised and structured and brought sort of that sort of ethos to the team and in terms of practice and training and way things were run. And we got some success through his time. And then we had a guy called Kevin Green who had been an ex-All Black, played for Waikato. And what was great about him was his man management skills. And he understood that he was coaching a team that was pretty experienced, had been around for a while, had tight 5 that had all played for the All Blacks. And he managed us really well in terms of almost like self-coaching and getting the best out of us in the way that... So, I learned a lot through that period with Waikato and also having the experience of being involved with the All Blacks and someone like Grizz Wiley, in terms of the way that he prepared teams. And it gave me a good grounding and to look at coaches that I'd seen coach me and trying to take the best out of what I thought that they brought and try to add something of my own personality to a coaching setup.
Did you always have your eye on coaching, thinking about it?
Yeah, I think it was always going to be a part of me. I mean, I'd captained a lot of teams growing up, and first 15s and age group teams, and I think captain Waikato in 1988 and club sides. I was player coach in Galwegians when I was 25, and player coach back in New Zealand for my club side in Taupiri as well. So I think that was always going to be a part of it. And a lot of people ask me, you must be disappointed you had 17 games for the All Blacks, and you never got on for sitting on the bench behind Sean Fitzpatrick. Well, I look on that as a positive. I look at in that, I play behind a great player, but it made me reflect on myself and what I could do to enhance the team in terms of if I wasn't selected or I was on the bench or whatever. Then I still had a role and a responsibility to help prepare the team for the game on the weekends. And like for me now, the hardest thing as a coach is telling players have been left out, been dropped out. It's still the hardest thing to do. But I understand what those players are going through, the ones that have missed out, the ones that have been left out, because I went through that and experienced. But it makes you kind of sometimes. You see a lot of superstars as players, and they don't really know why they are superstars, and they don't understand about the process of going through to improve all the time and to look at all the other aspects of a team. And sometimes that players have had to work hard or sitting on the bench actually probably end up making better coaches. Well, I think that's my experience has definitely been like that, because I've kind of had to sit on the fringes and look and evaluate and look at players in front of me, or what was my role in the team. And I think I learned a lot from those experiences.
We were talking about this actually before. Like, surely that experience helps you with the so-called midweek team and the Lions as well, because you've played against the Lions, so you know what it's like to lift your game to a certain level, to play against this caliber of a test player for perhaps the only time in your life, or some people's life. And then you also know what it's like to be involved in the squad, but maybe not playing on those Saturdays. So that must have impacted how you handle your line squads.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of the biggest part of coaching a team, and particularly the Lions, is trying to get not things right on the field, but trying to get things right off the field. If you can create an environment, have some harmony. When you're coaching 30 or 40 players, you're not going to please everyone, and there are going to be players that are going to be disappointed or upset or not happy with you, and that's kind of the way that professional sport is. But if you can create an environment where people feel that there's an opportunity for them, and it's one of the things with the Lions, and it hasn't always been the easiest thing to do, but you go on tour, and we say to all the players that everyone will get a start in the first 3 games. Now that kind of, and that's not always the best preparation for when you're thinking about having a test match in 2 or 3 weeks. But for me, the harmony within the squad is more important. And if I'm a player going on tour and I know that I'm going to get a start in the first 3 games, well, I feel like at least I've got a chance of putting myself in the shop window. Yeah. At least I've got a chance of getting lucky. And if the team plays well and I perform well, then I could be in contention for potentially, a test spot or sitting on the bench or something like that. So, those sorts of things are kind of important, and understanding that and getting things right off the field, and one of the things that I always talk about every time that we come together within a Welsh team is, talk about how lucky we are and to do what we do and get to get paid for it. But the most important thing that I say to the players is your family. Yeah. And any issues at home, anything that needs to be dealt with, we can look after that and deal with that. And if you get players that are coming from a happy environment, things are right at home, and their partners and kids are happy and enjoying things, then you're going to get a better performance out of a player. So there's lots of things that are kind of almost like non-specific rugby things that are really important to try and get the best out of a performance when it comes to Saturday.
Did you we're asking about the Waikato and the winning culture, because that was a very successful team, and you were successful in Galwegians. You took them up a division, Thames up a division. Then before Pat Lam did anything with Connacht 20 years before, you were beaten, I think the first Irish team to beat a French team in France, Northampton, home and away, wasn't it? But for Connacht, And then you're at 34 years of age, 1998, you're coaching Ireland. And for the Irish rugby's on a high now, but back then it was, I'm an Irishman, I can say it was disgusting. Like the 2 years before you took them over, they had come the bottom of the Five Nations as it was. 5 years before you took them over, they were winning one Five Nations game a year. That's what Irish rugby was. You were there for 4 years. When you left in 4 years, you were joint championship leaders with England. You beat England, but they won the tournament on points.
And it's just that it's the England team that eventually went on to win the World Cup. So that's sort of in a very short period of time. You took Ireland from there to there. So
what did you do?
Yeah, well, I think, look, it was the first game of the Six Nations in 1998, and Brian Ashton was the coach. Ireland lost at home to Scotland. He resigned. And I get rung up on the Sunday asking, would I be prepared to coach Ireland for the remainder of the Six Nations? So,
by the way, you're playing France away next weekend.
Yeah. And they'd just beaten Wales by about 50 in Wembley, I think, the day before. So, look, I wasn't probably ready for that. Just such a young and experienced coach. But someone gives you those sort of opportunities, and you don't walk away from the challenge. But and I wasn't looking at it as a long term. I was thinking, there's no security in this job. So 1998, Ireland had already had 9 coaches before me in the 90s.
Nice.
So you talk about, the dire straits that Irish rugby was in, and it wasn't just the coaching, it was the players that they'd be picked and dropped, and I kind of went into a team and I could almost smell or feel that these players would go into a game and rather than go and play and take risks, it was more like, if I don't make any mistakes, I've got a chance of being selected for the next game. So there was no continuity for coaching. There was no for the players in terms of being selected from week to week and having that sort of security almost. And so it was in a pretty dire position, and so for me it was just about putting. I think the players needed to get fitter as well, understanding, and I learnt on the way is understanding what Irish rugby was about, because they weren't the most skillful players at the time, but they had some heart and they had some grit, and probably some of the mistakes that I made early on in the first couple of years was I didn't understand at the time the Munster element and what that kind of brought to an Irish team. And sometimes you'd pick players from Leinster or Ulster who might have been better players, but they didn't have the heart of what a Munster player sort of brought to an Irish team and an Irish setup. And it kind of, that was then, and things are different, changed now. And
did that mirror back then Warren, the Waikato? Like similar kind of forward dominating?
Yeah,
big hard mean.
Yeah, probably. And I didn't underestimate that. But you at the time there, we got some success, and we got some success by making sure that we had a Munster element in there that kind of reflected what it meant to put, not just. We understood what it meant to play for a Munster, put that red jersey on, but also what it meant to play for Ireland, and kind of. So it was just simple things with passion, and we worked hard, and we trained hard, and we started to take fitness and preparation much more seriously, and just got so much more professional over that period. And as the game, was really still in the infancy of professional. I mean, when the game went professional in '95, Ireland didn't embrace it straight away. It took them a couple of years, and you're talking about coaching Connacht in '97, or we were still just like an amateur team, basically training Tuesdays and Thursday nights and getting together on a Friday with the players after work and playing on a Saturday against fully professional outfits. And that, so it took a bit of time, but what they did do is when they did go to a professional setup, I think that their structure now and what they've done is probably one of the best in the world, and you've seen that over a number of years, and they've started to really benefit from that with provincial rugby in Ireland and the history of provincial rugby in the 4 provinces, and now sort of and with some of the setups and some of the quality players that overseas players that they brought into the side. Real quality have made a massive difference to 2 or 3 players that have made a massive difference to the provinces, and some real quality coaching, and you've seen that impact on the Irish team. So and when I look back, I'm pretty proud of that. I think I was at the forefront and the start of that, and I think what made a big difference over that time was that I sort of had 4 years being involved, and players started to feel that a bad performance wasn't necessarily going to be dropped for the next week. That you try to create some continuity in there, and some consistency, and that's kind of what it needed. And I think that particularly sort of 20 years now, I think that's you've seen that sort of continually improve that. And like the structures and the systems in Ireland, one of the best, if not the best, in the world.
There's something there as well, Warren. Because I remember I was playing rugby in Ireland at that time, and it was kind of dour and dark. But there seems to be something in your coaching or your management, and I'm wondering where it comes from. You brought the people closer to the team. I remember you were doing little things like there was postcards you were sending in, asking people to communicate with the team before a big match. You brought the training centres exclusively outside of Dublin. I remember they were training in Connemara and moving them around the country, which is something that I presume comes from New Zealand.
Maybe it's a bit of a teaching background, because I was when I left school, I didn't know what I was going to do, so I went to university and taught for a number of years, and I was primary trainer, mainly taught sort of intermediates, like 10 or 12-year-old kids, 11, 12-year-old kids, and kind of ironically, that's kind of the age that I sort of treat the players at, of like, basically, and not being disparaging about the players, but basically players just big kids, you get them in a team environment and they want to have fun, they want to have a laugh, and they want to enjoy the environment. If I have meetings and stuff, players can't concentrate for more than 20 minutes. They're you teach a kid of kids at 11 and 12, and that's about the same. You can teach them for about 20 minutes before they start switching off. And rugby players are the same. You have a meeting and doing things, and if you go for too long, you see the eyes start looking around the window. They're not taking in the information. So it's just maybe that background, that teaching background, gave me a little bit of an understanding about what I was dealing with, and even that that first week with Ireland and playing France away in Paris. I asked, at the time was faxes, and we asked the Irish public to send some faxes of goodwill to the players and wish them all the best. And we had something like 5,000 faxes arrived in that week, and we put them in the team room in Paris, and it was really emotional because the players just went around and read all these things, and it was just genuine Irish people who they didn't really care so much about the result. They just wanted the guys to go out and try their best and wear the jersey with pride and do your best. And the players were seeing this, and they were kind of, it was so positive compared to the negativity that was coming from certain aspects of the media and whatever, and critics and whatever, and just seeing, and that had, and I can remember that had a huge impact on the players that week, and just understanding that how privileged they were to be in the position and the opportunity to put on an international jersey and go out there and perform. And for me, a lot of times is, as a coach, I don't always care about the result, but if I can go out there and go, because sometimes teams are better than you, and sometimes you're a little bit unlucky, but if I know that a player puts on a jersey and he goes and gives 100%, and he can come back and he can look himself in the mirror and say, I tried really hard today. That's all I can ask for a coach. And it's kind of just really simple things like that, just go out there and try hard and give it your all. And if you do that, then, you're going to be lucky. And probably for me, I kind of narrow things down when I first go into a team, or potentially teams that I've taken over. Just make it simple and concentrate on 3 or 4 things and getting things right, whether it's set piece or whether it's defence or whether it's the breakdown. Just really, really getting really accurate at 2 or 3 things, and then when you start getting good at that, then sort of expanding your game, and even certain teams that I've gone into that haven't been successful, the whole motivation about us is not, first of all, winning, is let's become a really hard team to beat.
Yep.
And if we become a really hard team to beat, then we're going to start winning a couple of games, and when we start winning a couple of games, then we can start expanding our game and developing our attacking game, rather than trying to go into a team and say, well, let's be really expansive. And that, well, actually, there's lots of little wee small things we've got to be really good at first before we can start thinking about, all the other aspects of the game. So let's become a really tough team to beat. And if someone's going to beat us, they're going to have to work the bollocks off to do that, because we're not going to give in and we're going to try really hard.
That's really interesting that you say that, make yourselves hard to beat, because then after Ireland you go to Wasps, and they're bottom of the table. When you leave, they've got 3 back-to-back-to-back premiership titles, European Challenge Cup, and that hugely famous Heineken Cup victory. And that's, I think, where you started to get the relationship with Sean Edwards and the league sort of style coaching. And there's been a lot written about that Wasps side and how they were hard to beat. Once you came in, the defensive structures got set. And is that how you built on that when you saw that team to start with?
Yeah, I think I had finished with Ireland and in 2001, and look, I was disappointed. My contract was up and they didn't renew that, and but I look back on that as a positive, because I wanted to take Ireland through to the World Cup in 2003, and I would have finished, but I didn't have that opportunity, and so I had a number of job offers, and one of them was to go to Wasps, and Nigel Melville was there. So I kind of went into Wasps originally as a forwards coach, and then after a few months, Nigel left and went to Gloucester, and so I was sort of kind of left in charge, and they were bottom of the premiership there. Sean Edwards had already been there, and we'd been, at the time, I'd been using a sort of a rush defence with Connacht, and we'd implemented that, and we're still learning with Ireland as well, sort of without really sort of understanding about it as much as we do now. But in those days, particularly with a team like Connacht, because there was no video analysis and that you could catch teams out by, all of a sudden come out very quickly defensively, and teams who weren't used to playing. Experiencing a rush defence, you could get a lot of success out of using it. So we were using that, with those teams. And when I went to Wasps, I said to Sean about, using a blitz defence and getting up in people's faces. And it was something he'd been toying with, but he hadn't been coaching it. So so we, between us, we introduced that with Wasps and worked really hard on that. To be honest, I looked at the team and the quality of the players in there, when you had, Delalio and Simon Shaw and Lucy and whatever. So how the hell is this team bottom of the premiership? Because they should be a lot better than that. It was sort of 3.5 years that I really enjoyed, and but I think the reason I was able to be, successful there is that all the stuff I had learned in Ireland, the experiences that I had with Connacht and with the Irish team, that really set me up for. It was a fantastic grounding, and I'm indebted to Ireland for giving me that opportunity, and even though it didn't, I was disappointed with leaving in end of 2001. What I gained from that experience has definitely made me a much better coach, and hopefully it's continued on.
I remember there was a match Wasps playing Munster, and that was in Dublin, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
And that was a big one for you personally.
That was a semi-final of the Heineken Cup. It was my first time back in Ireland since that was 2004. Yeah,
that was an incredible match, and you'd seen Howley was there at that time, wasn't he? He was in. And Munster were really on the ascendancy at that stage, and you took them down in Dublin, and that must have been pretty sweet.
It was kind of it was a nice day, in terms of that. I think Lansdowne Road at the time was absolutely jam-packed. We had about 2,000 supporters there from Wasps, that's all there was, and the rest of them were Munster. It was red everywhere. So, and I can remember we'd gone out there, and the plan was to target Ronan Agara, so we went really, really hard at him. And he went off after 20 minutes, and I was sitting there going, no, that wasn't you're not supposed to go off. He'd gone off injured. We'd sent Joe Woosey down his channel and to attack him. And Jason Holland came on at 10 and played brilliantly. And it was a game that we'd started exceptionally well and probably should have been up by a lot more. And Munster came back, and Declan Kidney was coaching Munster and said, look, these guys can't keep this up for the whole time. And Munster got themselves ahead with about 10 minutes to go, and we came back and won in the last few minutes. A great game. It was fantastic.
It was a great game. It was in the sun as well.
Yeah. Semi-final. The atmosphere was brilliant. And but I didn't kind of we'd as a group of players and at Wasps, what the boys. They were a great bunch of lads in terms of it was. Wasps at the time were a lot of people had this impression of Wasps being this sort of upper class London club. It was a kind of really working class attitude, and people just get on with things and work hard and play for each other. And I loved that about the club. We were kind of nomadic at the time and struggling, didn't have any facilities, and sort of working off a shoestring budget. And I can remember going down there and, we won the game, and Lawrence Delhilly opening up the door and started singing There's Only One Warren Gatland, sort of, so that, Munster players could hear it down the other end.
Oh, brilliant.
Yes. I think it was Eddie O'Sullivan was there or something as well, was watching it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
nice one, Lawrence. Making it nice
he
and
was.
audible.
As only Lawrence could do as well. He would, and that was part of. I remember beforehand, it was part of his motivation, the speech beforehand. These guys had shafted, they shafted me, and he would use anything he could in terms of trying to motivate players and a group of guys, and to try and get the advantage out of anyone. So look, it was a special day, and to win away from home, and set ourselves up for a final against Toulouse and Twickenham. So it was, it was great. It was a great match, to and fro, and two good sides going at each other.
So Wasps, you formed a relationship with Sean Edwards, and then as a player, Rob Howley. Later, you took both of those guys with you to Wales. And after a quick stint back in New Zealand, we're not going to gloss over it, but just an NPC and a Ranfurly Shield back in your own country. You're going to Wales. Year one, Grand Slam. I don't know. We want to ask, how do you do that? How do you you seem to go into teams and have immediate impacts?
It's a Grand Slam, 12th season now. You've had, World Cup semi-finalists, another Grand Slam, another victory. And you turn up after Wales' performance in the 07 World Cup, and they go on a Grand Slam, and it's
13 Ospreys, first match.
Yeah, I think Wales hadn't won in Twickenham for 20 years. I went when I went there and signed. It was a difficult decision to sign. I wonder was I doing the right thing? And I could have stayed here in New Zealand, continued on coaching, but I thrive on challenges like that. And when you look at it, it's not if you're being selfish about things, and it's like going to Wasps, or when they're bottom, you got nowhere to go but up, and Wales at that time were kind of bottom of the heap, and they'd just be knocked out by Fiji in the World Cup in 2007. So you kind of got nowhere to go but to go up and improve. And I went there and had a look around the region, went to the Ospreys, and I rang Sean Edwards up and I said, mate, I think we've got something to work with here. Some good athletes and some big. I said they can all catch and pass. The forwards and the front rowers, they were pretty skillful, and that was a big thing. And so he came on board, and got Rob Howley involved with the coaching. I was lucky enough to coach Rob. He came to Wasps, I think it was about 31, 32. And at the time, he wasn't as quick as he had been in his younger days. He, wasn't. I joke about this. Wasn't the best kicker, wasn't the best passer, but he had a rugby brain and very intelligent rugby player. Understood the game, and so got Rob involved as well. And the first game in Twickenham, I can remember. We went out there and we said, look, we wanted to play a bit of territory and kick. And one of the things about the Welsh players is that you say something, they take everything literally. If you say run through a brick wall, they won't question it. They'll do it. They follow instructions. They never complain about working hard and training hard. And great group of guys, but sometimes it's everything's literal. So at half time we talked about the message at half time was, guys, we talked about playing some territory and kicking smart, but we're not talking about kicking away a quality ball. And so we were down 19-5 at half time, and the last 5 minutes England had been camped on our goal line. If that had scored, they definitely would have won the game. We were just hanging in there. We got to half time, 19-5 down. The message at half time was, guys, let's keep the ball in hand, let's play some rugby. And we went out and completely dominated the second half, I think, but 70-80% territory in possession, and won 26-19. But I can remember in that first half, Sean sitting next to Sean Edwards, and I know just from his body language and a look that I got that he was sort of thinking, what the hell have I done coming to Wales with you? So it was one of those moments. And so I was come down the stairs at Twickenham, and a Welsh reporter stopped me on the way. And so we'd won there, and he said, Warren, he said, Graham Henry was known as the great redeemer. What are you going to be known as? And I looked at him and said, the lucky bastard. So look, it was pretty special. But we did things like at training, and I got the coaches to really drive this. So we trained really hard in that campaign, and I pushed them really hard. So every training session we'd be working them really hard, and we'd be saying things. Do you think England are going through this pain? Do you think they're hurting as much as us? Do you think Ireland are training as hard as us? Do you think Scotland are training hard? There's no way France are training. Every session we were doing that. We were really pushing the players to the limit. And by the end of that Six Nations tournament, we were there training there, and the players were saying that. Do you think?
Brilliant.
Do you think they're training as hard? No one's training as hard. I had no idea. I had no idea how hard anyone else was training. I know we were training hard, but the players took it on. The players believed it, and kind of that built its own momentum and created its sort of own thing. That they started to think that they were working harder than anyone else, and no one was training as hard as them. And think about Six Nations. You win a game, and you win and you get a little bit of momentum, and it can carry on. You lose the first game, and you can end up, getting the wooden spoon, because it's such a short tournament, and you need a little bit of momentum, you need a little bit of luck. And you look back on anyone who's won a Grand Slam or whatever, they'll look back and go, a couple of decisions went their way, a little bit of luck, and that's the way it is.
You're going into your 14th Six Nations now, which is astonishing as a head coach, not assistant. Like, it's 14th. From your first one in Ireland, what was the Five Nations, to what you're going into now, it's a kind of a cliche question, but if you could chat to yourself as a coach back then, momentum is a key. What's the biggest thing about that tournament that makes it different to anything else?
I think the biggest thing now is how competitive the other teams are. And if I look back at the start, it was Five Nations, every Six Nations was just about England and France. They were the teams. They were going to win, and
La Crunch.
Yeah, and everyone else was making up the numbers. But you're going into a Six Nations where there's still some improvement needed by Italy, but I think all the other teams think on their day they're capable of beating each other, and I think that's great. It's great for the tournament, and great for rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's taken a long time, and I think that's maybe been a reflection of the influence of overseas coaches in the Six Nations, of players and competitions. And if you look back at the autumn that we've just had, It's the best that the Northern Hemisphere teams have ever done against the Southern Hemisphere teams in the autumn, and I think that's great for Northern Hemisphere rugby. I think it's great for world rugby. I think it's fantastic that we're going into a World Cup where there's 6 or 7 teams think they've got a chance of winning the World Cup, and we aren't just talking about the 3 Southern Hemisphere teams with maybe someone else, who's going to make up the other semi-final position. Is it going to be England or France, which is traditionally what would have happened?
That's a really interesting point. I've just gone through the Grand Slam winners since that great England team in 2003, and Wales have got 3 Grand Slams, Ireland have got 2, and England have got 1. So the balance of power has definitely changed, and there's definitely a more competitive edge up there. And we saw that when we were covering it this year, didn't we? The last season, sorry. That's
Yeah, and I think from our record with Wales against Southern Hemisphere teams isn't as good as it should have been. We haven't, but I've kind of taken a little bit of a different attitude with the autumn and kind of seen that as an opportunity to experiment a little bit, whether that's with the way we wanted to play or selections of the game, because to me, the bread and butter of the competition is the Six Nations. Yep. That's there, and the autumn is friendly internationals, and so you want to do well in the Six Nations, and I think over that period I've been involved with Wales, we've got nearly a 75% win record in the Six Nations, which is I think pretty good, because that's what we've really concentrated on. And yes, we would have liked to have won more games in the autumn, and first time ever we've gone undefeated in the autumn series. It's just gone and developed some more depth, and I think that's important. But it's about trying to prioritise, what you think's important too.
Because you talked there about the autumn being a time for selection, and over your career you've made some incredibly, what from the outside look like bold or brave selections, bringing young guys in. So Sam Warburton being captained early, the hero that he is, George North coming in. How do you know when players are ready? Because those are young lads coming in to be performing at such a huge, on a huge stage.
Yeah, well, sometimes you don't have a choice. I mean, both of those were English qualified. So Sam Warburton's parents are both English, and same with George. He's Welsh speaking and stuff, and from Anglesey. But
that's brilliant.
Yeah. So sometimes
grab them before they
you see them from the cradle.
Yeah, you see a young player and you think, actually, I can't afford to wait another 12 months. I need to get him playing for Wales now, because if when England find out that he's actually eligible for them, we might be in a bit of a bun fight trying to secure their services. So sometimes it's necessity sort of forces it. But look, you don't get them all right, and you've got a small playing base. So George North was a no-brainer, basically. When you get a guy who's at the time was a sort of 108, 109 kgs playing on the wing, who could play centre and was as quick as he was, that was was an easy decision. And Sam Warburton as well. I kind of looked. It was a bit 2011. Matthew Rees had picked up an injury with a neck injury and missed out on the World Cup. And I saw that as an opportunity to promote Sam into the captaincy. And what I kind of thought that almost like a bit reflective of Richie McCaw. That if you look at Richie McCaw when he first started off as a young captain, he by his own admission found it tough in the first couple of years, and he just got better and better and better. And Sam very much reminded me of sort of a young Richie McCaw at the time, and this thing is such a young player. It's such a shame for us now that he's had to retire, and we were hoping that we were going to get another World Cup out of him. And he was just, to me, it wasn't a captain who said a lot, just led by example. He was a great professional in terms of the way he prepared and the way he trained and put his body on the line. And so sometimes you get a little bit of luck like that in terms of someone coming along.
Would you have a close relationship with your captain on your teams, Warren?
Yeah, I think there's sometimes always been a lot of pressure on particularly in Wales, on captains kind of trying to be vocal, taking a lot of, doing a lot of talking and taking a lot of responsibility. And the big thing is that what we've tried to work hard on is getting other players and other leaders in the group to take a lot of that responsibility. It's not always easy. It hasn't always been easy in Wales to do that, because it's a kind of a cultural thing that they don't push themselves forward and quite happy to stay in the background and let other people do that. But so it has sometimes been a challenge to get other people to do that. But we're in a really good place at the moment, sort of leading into the next 12 months.
Certainly look as though you've got a lot of leaders there now, so that's something that's changed over time since you've been there.
Yeah, it's been challenging and it's been tough, but definitely Alan Wynne Jones in the last campaign was outstanding. We had a couple of young captains for South Africa and Argentina in the summer, and they did a really good job. And sometimes when players get a bit older, rather than feeling more pressure, they feel less pressure, and that's where Alan Wynne Jones is at the moment. He's just comfortable in his role. He's not captaining his region, so that takes a bit of pressure off him. So he's just concentrating on Wales and allowing other players within the group to take responsibility, and it's a good position to be in.
He's been with you since your first match with Wales.
Yeah, he has.
And he's now almost set a standard every time he plays. I know a lot gets said about Retallick and even James Ryan in Ireland, but Alan Wynne Jones seems to have a standard that he never dips below. That's world class now, isn't it?
Yeah, and it took him a while. He was a player we get into mid to late 20s, and I would often have a number of conversations with him about looking after himself, resting, taking games off, and he was just reluctant to do that. And he's kind of come to the stage where he sort of realises that he should have listened to me a few years ago, that he understands that he needs to stay fresh and he can't keep playing every week. And so we would often, during campaigns, send him home for the week and to be with his family and then come back, or not pick him for a game, or give him a training session off, because he's done it all. So you've got to keep him fresh and you've got to keep him energised and stuff. And in the past, players would have hated to do that, because they would see that they'd been treated differently or treated. But that's the reward you get for doing what he's done, and you change it round to players and go, no, other players, rather than seeing that you've been treated specially, they'll be going, well, when I get to that age, when I've done what you've done, I hope that happens to me. And when they look at it like that, they kind of understand it, and they take it, oh, that makes sense, actually. So it's a reward for long service and performance and game after game and doing those sorts of things.
That's really interesting, because down here at home in New Zealand, they've given some of the big players that time off, particularly in the June Test. Richie McCaw got, I think Dan Carter might have had some time off, Kieran Reid, and it certainly looks as though it pays big dividends later on in their career to have those. They're just small windows in the big scheme of things, but certainly resting the body now, with rugby nowadays. Oh,
absolutely, and I think there is a fear, not so much a fear, that I look at the modern rugby players now, and I just look at the impact and the force and just how powerful these players are, that we need to make sure that we look after them and rest them and give them time off. And I think it's probably the next 15 or 20 years we'll see the impact of the game and how tough it is with these players when they're in their 40s. Start getting hip replacements and knee replacements, and you think you're still young men, and you've got to spend the next 40 years of your life, and you don't want to be crippled from playing the game, for sort of 10 or 12 years. And so, we need to make sure that the health and the safety of the players is definitely paramount. And there's obviously a big thing with concussion as well, and looking after players from that aspect. But just making sure that, from a training aspect, that we just try and give them some rest and keep them fresh and don't push them to the limits all the time, because they will break down. There's not many top quality players now that haven't been under the knife and had an operation, and that's just symptomatic of the game and where it is at the moment.
We were talking earlier, Warren, about selection as well, and the difference between, say, a club player and a test player, or even a provincial Heineken Cup and super player, and you had a nice metaphor about moving pictures.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I talk, I often talk Jonathan Davies and his first game for Wales, and we laugh about, we played against Australia and he was just a young kid at the time, and he said it was a bit like a rabbit in the headlights, everything was just happening so fast for him, and it was the first time he'd experienced a game at that level in pace and intensity. And then, so I explain, when I talk to young players and we're talking team stuff, we talk about this pitches, when you first go into the international, the pitches are just going so fast, how do I, and one of the things as a coach, you can't coach experience. So the next game or the game after or the game after the game, the pitches start to slow down, and and you start to see things, and then all of a sudden the clarity comes and everything starts to come into focus, and that's when you explain that, and I've been guilty of it in the past, sitting in the box, and I know all the fans there, and you go, why didn't he pass? He's got a 2-man overlap, or why didn't he do that? Why didn't he make that decision? But sometimes, things are just happening so quickly for these young players. They just haven't had time to process it, and the more they spend out in the middle and big games, and whether it's Heineken Cup semi-finals or finals or big matches or big internationals, the decision making becomes easy, the clarity becomes a lot more easier, and they'll make the correct decisions. But when they first experience that, it is tough for them, and so that's why sometimes you get players that are really, really good club players, but just have not got the ability to step up to the next level to become good internationals, but you don't know that until they have that opportunity, and you find out about them, and you often hear about people talk about, he's a really good club player, but he hasn't kind of been able to make the next step up.
We were on, again, it's around that stuff and selection. I remember Rob Kearney, before Ireland were playing against Wales last time, he was talking about coming against the Welsh number 10s and Dan Biggar and the Triggers. And he was now an older senior fullback defensively, that he could almost anticipate where the ball was going to go. You've got like Lee Halfpenny, and you've called him the best defensive fullback in the world. Do you think there's any coincidence that some of the best fullbacks are actually older lads? Their pace might be gone from when they were younger men, but it's becoming very important now, isn't it, backfield defence? And there's a few older guys on the block there.
Oh, absolutely. And like you talk about what Rob's saying about the triggers and stuff, and seeing what's in front of you, and the best players, they're looking at positioning, where's the 10 standing, is he in the pocket a little bit, how flat is he, what's he looking at, where are the wingers positioned, and they're able to read setups and body language just a little bit better than everyone else. And young and inexperienced players, or players that haven't got the same ability, they don't see the picture in front of them, and the best players see the pictures, see, and that's why at the moment whether everyone talks about changing the picture, so you might show one setup, just before a scrum or before a line out, and then move late, whether it's on attack or whether it's defence, so that you're trying to catch someone out. So, for example, you might have your winger up flat, and the opposition 10 sees space, and then all of a sudden the ball goes into a scrum, the winger drops back 10 or 15 yards, the 10's decided he's going to kick the ball, and he ends up kicking down the throat of the winger because he's changed the setup really late. So it's understanding those sorts of things, or getting that communication from the outside on really quickly, so you get teams working on where a 10's made a decision he's going to kick the ball. All of a sudden the opposition, your winger sees that the opposition wingers move back, so he's got to get that information in really quickly, that actually it's not the kick option that's on, it's the shift option that's on. And so those are the sorts of things that are going on in the game at the moment, which is quite exciting. And a lot of teams have been playing the same way, and everyone gets used to a certain attacking setup, and they are seeing the same pitches. And when you see the same pitches, then it becomes a lot easier to read defensively. And then so the next challenge is how do you show a different pitch or a different setup so that the players aren't quite sure, well, actually, what's the option here, what's going to happen here? And that's when you get mismatches and you get people called out because they haven't seen the picture in front of them.
You were talking in your book about, I think it's a Rob Howley setup that he's got in training, 15 versus 15. It's a chaos.
Yeah.
And it's about the transition between attack and defence and vice versa. Is that what you're talking about at the moment? This is the major change in the game right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of teams are doing that because there is that transition from attack and defence, and how quickly you can get back into either into shape from an attacking position, or defensively you can get some organisation into it. You know, we've been looking at Fiji for the World Cup, and it's one of our teams in our pool. I mean, so we looked at them, and 75% of their tries are scored from turnovers. So that for us becomes a massive work on that weekend, from turnovers, how we react to that, how quickly we get ourselves into a defensive shape if there is a turnover created during the match. So there's lots of those sorts of things that teams are working on, and in terms that, and a lot of teams at the moment are playing quite similar attacking setups, whether they talk a 2-4-2 or a 1-3-1, and what we mean by 1-3-1, I think you guys have explained that in the past. How many forwards you have in certain different pods, or whether you're playing hit back or a same waist up. So, like I said, the defensive pitches are quite similar. Yeah. So you kind of now know what the options are. So the challenge is probably you'll see some teams will hold a little bit of stuff back over the next 12 months and try and set up some different formations so that when the World Cup comes around, that some of the shapes are a bit different.
Yeah.
The picture is going to be different defensively.
Yeah. Do you want to show a defense? So when guys are coming up, they're going, oh, what's the option here? I'm not quite kind of sure. Where at the moment we're seeing stuff where, say, traditionally, say with Retallick as a ball player, he's probably with the All Blacks, he's the best ball player in the world, and he's fantastic. He stays nice and square. He can throw a dummy, he can run himself, he can do a little tip on, or sometimes they might pass out the back as a back option to one of the backs. Well, but that setup has been shown a lot of times, so a lot of teams are using that same sort of setup, or they might have someone come through the middle. Say the All Blacks have used that with Sonny Bill or something like that, so those kind of setups. So, but you know now, because you've been, as a defensive team, you've seen it so many times, you've run it at trainings and the same thing, so you can start seeing the pictures, or start seeing the options, so teams have got a lot better.
It's come from league, Warren, hasn't it? Like these attack shapes, is it because the defences are so good that you need... Eddie Jones in an interview said he sees the next evolution of rugby union is rugby league style attack shapes. So is it coming from league, do you think?
I think some of it is that what's different is that is the line speed defensively, because we're all about... I mean, the thing with the league is that you'll see that they keep their shape defensively and they stay square, but they're quite happy as long as they can soak up those 5 or 6 tackles. Yep. So you're going to get the ball back. So the league's all about completing sets and seeing if someone can make a defensive error, a system error or something like that, where we've become a lot more about line speed. And the thing with line speed is that you will make... if you've got more lines, you'll make more system errors, but it's kind of like it's a trade-off. You get high risk, high reward. Yeah. So yes, the risk is higher, but the reward is greater as well. And teams that have gone are much more passive defensively, they will probably make less mistakes and their tackle percentage will be higher, but then they're probably conceding ground and then quick ball and that sort of stuff. So it's all about speed of ball. How many phases can you go but before you can force a team into kicking it, whatever. I talk about West about controlling halfway, and the thing is the ability to control the ball on halfway. And and what I mean by that is that you might play 3 or 4 phases through halfway, or 5 phases around the halfway line. You don't get any reward out of that.
Yep.
So you think, okay, what's my next options? Is maybe to put the ball in the air in a box kick, or to put the ball in the 22 to kick it out. And the likelihood is that if the opposition team receive the ball in their 22, they're probably going to kick the ball back to you. And so now you've got the ball back on halfway, so you're controlling halfway again.
Yeah.
And so your big thing is then how do I, if I box kick and then I get a return, now once I've got the ball in their 22, then I'm still controlling halfway, but now I'm in a much more positive attacking situation.
Is your full team aware of controlling halfway, or is this your playmakers?
We talk about to the team about controlling halfway, but definitely to our 9s and 10s, they become pretty important to that. And then your midfield and so your loose forwards, that sort of that. We talk about the spine of your team and things like that. Just talking about, we don't want to keep playing, because if you've gone, you're not getting any reward out of attacking at halfway, and a team's coming pretty hard off their line. You've played a few phases, the ball's become slow. You haven't got into a good attacking setup and a good structure, and you might go 5, 6, 7 phases, and all of a sudden you get a turnover and a penalty. Well, now the other team controlling halfway, because they're kicking the ball. Say on a penalty turnover, they're kicking the ball out and having a line out, and you're 22. Now you've got to get back that ascendancy. So it's kind of a way of the players understanding how the chessboard works in a game, and who's in control of that area.
I find this particularly interesting, the tactics, and you're talking about controlling halfway, and throughout your career you've been innovative with tactics and the way you play the game. There's the 09 Lions, there was the 2011 World Cup, there's some of the things you did there. 2017 you come here with the Lions. 2017 in November, there's some changes there we saw with the Welsh team. Is that a collective in the coaching setup, or do some people speak up and the players speak up? Or how do you go about changing those tactics, or do you watch other teams? And
sometimes it's there's nothing wrong with copying off someone else that's been successful. And it's not always about trying to reinvent the wheel. And it's I'm really open to players, and often say to players when they come into us, look, if you've got something that's been working for you, bring it to the table. If you've got a move that you think special, you've got an idea, bring it, because it's not about, players, they're the ones who are on the field, they're the ones making decisions. Sometimes they've got the best ideas as well. So it's just trying to stay, like I said, almost like one step ahead of where you think the game's going, and what you're doing, and not always showing what you're doing. We spoke about earlier about like 2011 with the World Cup quarter-final, Wales against Ireland, and we knew that Ronan O'Gara's threat and his kicking ability and his tactical kicking and playing territory was a real strength of the Irish, and that's when we employed playing a 2 fullback system on playing the two dropping 2 players back and playing on the 15. It just didn't give him a touchline to be able to work to or kick over anyone's head, and it really frustrated him that day. And I think he kicked the ball out 3 or 4 times on the full, and really gave us some momentum.
So where does that, is that a pre-tournament decision, Warren? Have you got, so against Ireland, like now you're researching Fiji. So do you go, when Ireland come up, this is going to be our tactic structure?
So already we are couple of things that we did that we'll do with, we'll place some teams differently in the World Cup, and we're already talking about that now, having experienced that, and we did a little bit of that in the autumn, and so
wow.
Brilliant.
So is that you and the head coaches, or do you have a few players involved in that?
No, probably just the coaches more about that, and the players are happy enough to buy into that. In the World Cup, there's probably 2 teams that will play a different way than the other two teams.
That's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll be watching out for that.
Yeah. So and we've already we've talked about that, added some structure into doing that, because I think there's, like I said, a lot of teams are playing the same way at the moment, so you've got to be prepared to, what can you do, bring to the table. It's differently, and where can you exploit where you see the weaknesses of an opposition, or where sometimes you see potentially what your strengths are. So it's not always about. Sometimes it's what you've got available to you in terms of personnel, in terms of the players as well. So that, but so that's kind of interesting. It's kind of exciting at the moment.
Yeah,
trying
it's
to think
like
about
chess.
it's.
Do you enjoy that part of coaching?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that sort of that challenge of that sort of aspect of the game, and go in there and trying to do things. And I get a buzz out of coaches who come up with calls and moves and things and that, and we were talking to someone the other day. I mean, I used the 13-man line out against Australia in 1996.
And you were using it with Connacht a couple of years before that.
That was with Connacht in 1996. Yeah, we used
that against Australia. And then you did it with Ireland as well.
Yeah, a couple times with Ireland and stuff and things. So it's trying to think a little bit outside the box, and sometimes you've got to think a bit differently.
But you were doing that early doors. Like, the rumours are that when you went to the Alex Wiley's All Black squad, you were bringing in new little games and training.
Yeah, and that was probably from my teaching, really. Just the different things, because I mean, the game's changed so much. You think if you go on All Black tours in those days, you went with a coach, a manager, a doctor, and a physio. And then the home team basically supplied you with a kit man and a liaison officer. So a lot of the players used to take aspects of the warm-up and do things, and then say 3 or 4 players will be designated with taking a skill drill, and he'd be doing the next one. So that's what happened in those days. So, as a teacher and stuff, it was easy enough for me to be doing different games and different skills and that, and taking parts of warm up, and that used to be shared around. So that first 15-20 minutes of an All Black training session was very much player led before the coaches came in and got involved.
That tactical innovation, is it different for the Lions? Because you were in your book as well. You're watching the All Blacks. You went to the whole Rugby Championship, I think, or most of it. Before the Lions tour, so you're structuring, you're spotting some things that Argentina did, playing off 9. You're spotting that worked well for them. So you're structuring a game plan there.
Yep.
When you get to Lions level, and sorry, this is longer. I'm rabbiting on now, but I remember Ian McGeechan talking about 2009, and you developed this system to take on the box. Is it different? Do you then have to find players to play your system because you've worked out this game plan?
Not so much from a Lions perspective, because you've got the pick of the best players from 4 nations. So in terms of the way that you want to play, it was interesting. If you ever look at, it's quite funny. I think World Rugby or someone put out the stats from the Lions and the All Blacks, and if you look at the stats, you think there's only one team playing rugby here. You look at the number of passes from the tight 5 from the Lions compared to the All Blacks tight 5, amount of passes during the game and offloads and stuff. It shows the Lions in a pretty positive light. And when we came out I think there was an expectation from a lot of people that we were going to try and play a set-piece game, scrummage, line out and kick everything. Yeah. That was never, ever the intention from us. The intention was that if we were going to beat the All Blacks and to come in, we've got to play rugby. We've got to be risk takers, and we've got to go and try and be positive in the way that we play. That's the only way that you're going to do that. And because the All Blacks traditionally, in the last so many years, their set piece has been one of the best in the world. I mean, there's no weakness for them at scrum time. They've had one of the best percentages of line-outs and stealing opposition line-outs. So we worked really hard on our set piece, but if we thought we were just going to play a kicking game and play territory, we were never ever going to be in the hunt against the All Blacks. So we spoke about the ability to be bold and to take risks and to look at offloading and despite what anyone would say and categorise me, I mean, the message to any team and always to the Welsh players, and you ask them, if we're on our own goal line and we've got an overlap or a two-man overlap, then I expect you to make the right decision as to go and to move the ball, because that is the right decision. If our execution is bad and we throw a bad pass, well, we can deal with that, but you've made the right decision tactically. And it's kind of like it's the message all the time about being is players, getting players to be bold about making the right call and not being conservative by kicking the ball in your 22 if the option is the right option is to shift the ball. So, we came down here and definitely the attitude was that we've got to try and play rugby against the All Blacks.
It's funny, the whole Warren ball thing, and we won't go into depth about it, but the negative connotations and up the jumper kind of stuff about it. If they look at your teams over the past, however, particularly your Welsh teams, like Shane Williams is scoring a mountain of tries. George North is doing the same. Like your boys out wide score a lot of points, and it's actually a very attractive. It's surely physical, but it can be a very attractive brand of rugby. We did a video on Warren ball actually, and we think it's actually really smart, and a lot of teams have played what we perceived it to be.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure when people say about Warren ball, and I just say, well, if you look at we haven't. A lot of the stuff between the 15s has never been off 9. We play a little bit different. We're playing differently now, but we had a group of players that came through a Welsh setup that actually happened to be really big and physical. And you're kind of looking at probably big and physical, but not with the greatest skill set in terms of passing and offloading and stuff. So you think, actually, I've got to make the most out of what I've got here. And someone like Jamie Roberts, I mean, when he was at his best, getting you across the gain line was absolutely, and giving you front foot ball to be able to play off was, that was his what he was good at. And then Jonathan Davies, not a small man, well over 100 kgs, and then you got George North. So the ability to use those players to get you some good front foot ball and quick ball, and then to be able to use the likes of Halfpenny when he was his best, or a Shane Williams then on the end of a back line, or encouraging both wings to be on the same side of the field. It's just utilising sometimes what you've got at your disposal. And so people say to me, Warren ball. So go and watch Wasps play. And now when you've got Stuart Abbott and Fraser Waters as your two midfielders, and you've got Josh Lucy and Tom Voice and Mark Van Gisbergen and Rob Howley and Alex King, where's your big players there? They're not massive. Yeah. They're good footballers. So we had to play differently with that team because of the personnel that you had. So, and I think that's the art of coaching, is looking at what you've got at your disposal and what you think you can get the best out of. And we don't. Our teams, the personnel in our teams changed a little bit recently, and as a result of that, you play slightly differently. So yes, if we're playing George North and we want to use some gain line stuff, we can use them to hit up, but we haven't quite got Haddy Parts when he's playing in the midfield can carry the ball up, not as effectively probably as a Jamie Roberts, but Dan Bigger, if he's playing 10, he's a very strong defensive player, can carry the ball, but you don't use a Gareth Anscombe to hit up or something. Yeah. Johnny Sexton with Ireland is not afraid to take the ball to the line because he's a big physical man. Yeah. So with England, they're not going to use George Ford, but Owen Farrell can take the ball to the line. Yeah. So it's kind of it's the players that you've got at your disposal and how and working a game around what reflects their strengths as much as anything. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about the Welsh lads, and they can be quite literal at times and easy to coach. I presume that might help. In your book as well, when you were talking about the interview process for the Lions job, you said that one of your assets is that you're aware of the cultural differences between the teams and the countries. I mean, obviously, test experience with Ireland and Wales, and then Wasps in the Premiership. Can you talk to us a little bit about the cultural differences from a coach's point of view? How that actually manifests itself on a rugby field and training?
Well, I think if you look, say from the Irish players, they're the most vocal out of all the players. They ask the most questions. They challenge the most. Now, people go, oh, why is that? Well, traditionally in Ireland, a lot of the Irish players have come through private schooling. So, whether it's Blackrock College or Clongowes or whatever, or through the Leinster schools. So they're pretty well educated in terms of that. So they're kind of, so that's, and so culturally from that perspective, they're great to deal with because their understanding of the game is excellent. But I'm saying they will challenge you, and they will, and they're vocal in the way that they talk. The Welsh players, and they're definitely not anywhere near as vocal. They are doers, and it's kind of like, and it's quite strange because you look at how does that reflect in society. So you look at a lot of the Welsh, a lot of the Welsh contribute a lot to the armed forces in the UK. Because they're doers and they're good at taking instructions and good at following orders and that's what I say about the Welsh players. Well, you say run through that brick wall, they'll run through the brick wall. They'll work their butts off. They don't mind working hard. They don't question or challenge stuff, and so that's different. And you've got like I said about the Irish players, the English players. They can bring a self-belief and confidence because of where they've come from and history and tradition as well. Scottish players come through. We haven't picked a lot of the Scottish players, but they tend to come through, a little bit like the Irish in terms of that. But they're a mixture of both in terms of. So look, culturally, it's there are differences and understanding those differences. I kind of made it. I was lucky enough when I went to Ireland. First of all, that I'd done Irish history at university, so I knew. And what you read in the books isn't always what happens in real life. So understanding that, so I did Irish history from 1916, from the Easter Uprising and stuff through to 1945 was one of the courses that I did. So when you understand all that stuff and in terms of that history and the North and the South, and the players know that know about it and understand it, kind of. It makes it easier in terms of that, because I think that's kind of what's important. I talk to a lot of coaches, a lot of Southern Hemisphere coaches who come up to the Northern Hemisphere, and one of the things that I say to them, they often ring me up and ask for some advice. I said, you can't bring a Southern Hemisphere model and then just transfer that to the Northern Hemisphere. It won't work. You've got to. You can bring elements of it, but you've got to understand about the length of the season in the Northern Hemisphere. You've got to understand when you're dealing with different players, you're dealing with different weather conditions. You've got to understand a little bit about where you're going, the history and the culture of the place. And if you do your homework and do all those sorts of things, then you've got a much better chance of being successful. And some of the failings of Southern Hemisphere coaches going to the Northern Hemisphere is that they haven't done their own homework, and there's probably been an arrogance about where they come from. They think that is much better than the Northern Hemisphere and what's happening there. And but there is a lot of good things happening in the Northern Hemisphere. There is a lot of very good technical coaches in the Northern Hemisphere. And so people who do that, doing your homework, understanding about where you're going, understanding about some of the history and the past and the culture, it will give you a massive advantage if you've done that preparation in terms of being successful.
Really
it's very, very interesting. There's a big question down here in New Zealand, Warren, about another job coming up at the end of the year, about the All Blacks. Has that crossed your mind? Presumably it has. And sort of what's the plan post Wales?
Yeah, but obviously I've seen the speculation like everyone else. Look, to be honest with you, I've finishing with Wales after the World Cup, and the plan was to come back home. I'd love to come back and coach in New Zealand and do some Super Rugby if there's an opportunity, and that's where I see that being important for me to come back and to get involved, in some level of in New Zealand rugby. Not at all that level, but ideally, if there was an opportunity for Super Rugby and to spend my time there, reintegrating back into New Zealand rugby, and then if you're successful, then other opportunities might come along in the future. But I also understand that in 12 months' time, there may not be any coaching jobs, back here in New Zealand, and so, I might be coming back here, just taking them some time off, reflecting a little bit, and then looking for a job somewhere else. So, but I'm not kind of worried about it. I'm a great believer in what will be, and something will come along. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I'll have, hopefully, not too many troubles finding a coaching job if I have to. But so that's definitely that's the plan. Ideally, come back. If there's a chance to get involved in some Super Rugby, love to do that, and then to see what happens after that.
So you're not done yet, Warren. The media, Warren, and your relationship with it. You mentioned, I think, vitriolic criticism when you left Brian O'Driscoll out of the team. Things have been said about you, and then there was somewhat personal attacks during this Lions tour. We've got a YouTube channel, and we deal with comments, and you're a head coach of a country, different levels, and people say this shouldn't get to you, don't worry about it. How do you deal with stuff that's not nice, and does it affect you?
It's a really good question. I think in the past it was those things had more of an impact on you in social media. I've seen players now who I would say 3-4 years ago, when they saw stuff on social media that it would almost destroy them if the stuff was really, really negative. But I see them now, and they just swipe. They don't. It's almost like a bit more water off a duck's back for a few people. They just realise, just people understand that there's an element out there that no matter what, they're going to be critical or want to be or aggressive or whatever. I think in the past there are times I've said things and wound people up, but probably if you look in the last 3 or 4 years, I've really kept my counsel. I've tried to people keep saying, when are you going to say something, and then you get criticised by a certain element of the media because you're not saying anything, so they want to criticise you if you do say something, and then if you don't say anything, you get criticised for being boring and not being out there. It's sometimes I kind of had this policy, whether it was right or wrong, that I kind of thought if I was asked about anything, I would tell the truth or I would give an honest opinion about what. But that's not always the easiest thing to do. And the reason I'm saying that is that if I get asked a question and I'll give the answer, the honest answer, or I'll give an honest opinion, is so that when I get asked about it again in the future, I don't have to think about what I said because I know I've told the truth or I've said what I thought, and that doesn't always go down brilliantly with people, but it's just it's part of the job. It's part of the role. The thing with I think the Brian O'Driscoll thing in 2013. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a coach, and kind of. But we made what we thought was the right decision at the time, and we didn't look. We haven't gone back and we haven't gloated about it was a record victory for the Lions in terms of performance. We just thought at that time for that game that was the right decision, and that's what you get asked to do. And the thing about selection or coaching, it's just, I always keep saying to people, it's just a matter of opinion. And if you go and if six of you were six mates were sitting around there at a table and you said, well, pick the team the next All Black team to start the next game, I guarantee you all wouldn't agree in terms of who should be in each position. And like that, we made a call on that. But one of the things that I'm incredibly impressed about Brian Driscoll, and it wasn't a long conversation when we left him out of that third test, but one of the analysts said to me afterwards, he was with Brian in the lift, and he said, "I've talked the talk, now I've got to walk the walk." And what he meant by that is he had been involved as the Irish captain for a number of years in that situation where he had been saying to players who'd missed out on the starting 15 or missed out on the 23, people in here are very disappointed with the selection, you've missed out, but your role over the next few days to do whatever it takes to help this team perform on Saturday so we get a test performance or a test result. And he didn't throw his toys out of the cot. He did exactly that.
Yeah.
And he could have come out and been negative and critical, but the amount of respect I have for him in terms of the way he conducted himself is absolutely outstanding. And the thing is, as a coach, you make a selection, and what probably would have softened the blow is that we could have put Brian on the bench, and we could have made that decision, and everyone would have, and it probably the criticism wouldn't have been as harsh in terms of that. But we looked at the team, and we're playing Australia in the third test. We've got Manu Tuilagi who's fit, and I'm thinking, and we're thinking, as the other coaches, 10 or 15 minutes to go. Is Manu Tuilagi, if Manu potentially going to come on and make a bit more of a physical impact than Brian? And so we made that decision. So, kind of, if you're gonna make a big call, then you've got to have the balls to actually go through and do it what you believe is the right decision. And it's quite interesting, the reflection of a lot of people. Wales obviously were supportive of myself and got excommunicated from Ireland in terms of I had to go back a few years later, get on the Late Show and basically get out.
That's right, yeah, you went straight onto it after the Nine story.
Yeah, get on my hands and knees and beg for forgiveness sort of thing. The English were kind of 50-50. I came back to New Zealand and no one in New Zealand really said anything to me about that. It was the accepting that, that's a role of a coach to make the call, and that's his prerogative. There was nothing, people were trying, there was conspiracy theories, it was personal and all that. To me, my job is to win a test series, and you've got to do whatever it takes to, in terms of selection. It doesn't mean you're always right, and it doesn't mean even after that third test that it didn't reflect back and go, actually, was that the right call? That's part of your job. It's part of sometimes being brave and making tough calls. And I went back to 2001, and it was during the foot of mouth when I was coaching Ireland, and we lost away to Scotland in a game that we should have won. We made some selection decisions that I wasn't 100% in agreement with. We changed the way we defended in that game, and as a result of that, and we beat everyone else during the Six Nations. It cost us a Grand Slam. And I promised myself after that game that I would never, if I believed in something 100% as a head coach, that I would never compromise myself on a selection. And most times when, as a collective, as coaches, 4 or 5 of you sitting around the table, you're going to have some differences of opinion, but I'd say collectively, 98, 99% of the time it's a collective agreement.
Yeah.
You have a set of rules where it's a common thing within a squad, and everyone knows what the boundaries are, but not every player is treated the same. And sometimes a superstar might be given to an X-factor player, might be given to a Friday because he's really, really important, where you'll make a decision on another player on a Tuesday because there's 2 players in that position that are 50-50. And actually, you're not going to give him until Friday when the other player can come in and you'll make a call on that selection on a Tuesday. So, things aren't always, it's not always 100% the same, in terms of the way that players are treated, because the makeup of your squad is different, and and the quality of players are different. But as long as they understand that process, and as long as they understand that, there's not favouritism and for whatever reason and they understand that you've told them that, guys, it's not fair, but this is the way that we operate because it's about what we think is best for the team. And like I said, with certain players, we will give them more time because they're important to us, and other players will make a call on you early in the week because if we don't think you're going to be right, then it's best for the team that the other player knows early in the week that he's playing for the week, and his preparation becomes better. So if they understand that and you explain that to them, then you don't have any problems. And it's kind of and it's going through those processes, that they understand what the boundaries are and what the process is, and that not everything is coach led. A lot of it's player led. And when we, things like now, we go out if we're going to go out, and the boys go out for a drink. And they don't do that very often. The players will say, "Is it okay if we go for a drink?" And they go, "Well, that decision's made by the leadership group. They decide on that. What's the curfew? What time you got to be back? Make sure you front up the next day. All those sorts of things. So, and that's why that whole environment is so essential. And if you can get that environment right, you've got some sort of chance of being successful. I think that's important.
Brilliant. Warren, we usually finish off our interviews with 2 questions, the 10-14 questions, and to us the 10-14 represents 2 kids, the number 10 and number 14, and their first steps into sport of any kind. And usually we get involved because it's fun before it ever becomes competitive. What were your first steps into sport of any kind, and do you know who you took them with?
My first steps into sport? I think my first steps into sport was as a 5-year-old going down to my father taking me down to the local rugby club for a junior boys weigh-in on a Sunday before the start of the season. So playing in bare feet,
Nice.
and we didn't wear boots in New Zealand until we were about 10 years of age. So the first 4 or 5 years bare feet every Saturday morning, and I loved it. And been so excited. It was probably the one night of the week, a Friday night, my mother could get me to go to bed early. I used to fold my jersey and shorts up and have them on the end of the bed and be...
Look at him, he was even prepared back then.
Yeah. And so excited about Saturday morning and going and playing, And as a kid, and sometimes we get so PC about everything, and we've got to be careful in the way, because things in the world are competitive. And as a kid, I was so competitive. I wanted to win and win everything. And I can remember going, if I ever played in something or did something at school where the score wasn't being taken and there was no winners or losers, I lost interest straight away. I had no interest in playing a game that there wasn't a winner or a loser. So and that's kind of the way that I've always been. It's been about competitive and doing your best and trying to win. And to me, success isn't always about winning. Success is about overachieving. And if you're if you're a team that is expected to be in the bottom half of a competition and you finish mid-table or better, then you've been successful that year. So that's the way I look at success. It's not always about being the top. It's about overachieving.
Brilliant.
I do like that a lot.
It's been really enjoyable. So we wish you, we don't know if it's going to be your last year in the Northern Hemisphere or not, but Six Nations and World Cup year, we wish you whatever kind of success that you imagine for your own team up there.
Yeah.
And
Thanks very much.
best of luck for the
Cheers.
future.
Yeah, and we'd like to thank you for giving us your time on your holiday. To us in the Team 14 community, it's been an absolute honour and a massive privilege. So thank you very much, Warren.
Cheers. Thanks, David. Thanks, Gareth. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Brilliant, Warren. That was excellent. Hopefully the tech worked, lads.
Parts of it will be